Conception, childbirth, adoption, abortion. These topics just send things going through your mind. That's going to be relevant to the subject we're going to be talking about today. Modern technology is wonderful. In reference to medical modern technology, we're able to do things now that couldn't be done before. And sometimes the things that can be done should not be done. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where sometimes wonderful things can be done that are ethically good, spiritually fine. I want to talk about in vitro fertilization. In vitro fertilization is different from artificial insemination. Artificial insemination is when you take the husband's sperm and you insert it into the wife's uterus. And after that, the pregnancy, hopefully, will just progress normally. In vitro means in glass. It's a Latin term, in glass. And what happens is that you take the mother's egg and you take the husband's sperm, and outside of the womb, you unite the two, and then once they're united, then you place the embryo into the mother's womb. So far, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it's just a great advantage to couples to be able to conceive when they formerly could not conceive. And so there you have it. Now, here's the rub. Here's the problem, is that it's very typical for a fertility clinic to fertilize many more eggs than they intend to use. Now, from their perspective, the reason is that you have a better chance at a healthy, good pregnancy if you can take all these embryos and you can select the strongest. The difficulty again comes in that you might unite 15, 20 embryos, sperm and egg, and you unite them, and then the parents, why, they actually implant and use 3 of them. Now what happens to the balance of those embryos? Well, one answer is that you can freeze them. Now this is just remarkable, but we're able to do it. You can freeze them for years. One article that I read said that theoretically, it hasn't been tried yet, but you could theoretically keep them 100 years and they would still be viable and could still be implanted into a woman's uterus, and you could have a pregnancy and have a natural birth from that embryo. That is just amazing. But back to the point. There are 4 options that are given to women in a fertility clinic with reference to their unused embryos. So, they united into, made, if you please, 15 extra ones. They chose the strongest of the embryos, and now the parents have all they want. Or maybe they figure that we've got a couple or 3 children now, and maybe in the future we'll want more children, but in the meantime, we'll freeze these and we'll let you know. Now, what's happened is that in these fertility clinics, they've got large quantities of embryos that have been abandoned. It's expensive. You spend between, I don't know, $600, maybe $1,000 a year, perhaps more. The parents will, in order to freeze these and keep them in these fertility centers. So there's some upkeep to this. And it's just very common for parents just to simply stop paying. And what happens then? And so you have these, some said as many as 1 million in the U.S. of these fertilized babies, embryos that is, that exist, and they've just been abandoned. Think about that. When does life begin? When we were arguing, when I was a young preacher and we were arguing the matter of abortion, we would often use the 1-minute argument. Do you remember that? And the way that it went was, if you said that human life begins at the beginning of the 2nd trimester, then the question is, well, so it's okay to kill that baby before that, but not after that, right? Well, let's narrow this down logically just to 1 minute. So at this moment, it would be all right to take the life of that unborn child, but a minute after that, then it would be murder, right? Because if you could narrow it, think about that, narrow it down. And that was the 1 minute argument. What about a minute before that? What about a minute before that? If you take it all the way up to birth and you say, after the baby is born, then it would be heinous murder to take that child's life. What about a minute before birth? No appreciable difference in the baby, just a difference in how we view the baby. And so, when does life begin? And when you run through that logic, the only plausible answer to the question, when does life begin? Human life. And the answer has to be, it begins at conception. That's what we're talking about, the ethics of in vitro fertilization, and in particular, what about the embryos that are not used? Today I want to introduce you to my brother and sister in the Lord, the Hudgens, and Drew and Kate are here, and they've brought their sweet children with them, and it's good to have you.
Thank you.
Now, what I said, Drew, is that if people use the in vitro fertilization to create healthy pregnancies, they have leftover embryos. There are 4 options about what they can do. 1, they can continue to pay to keep the embryos up, frozen. 2, they could donate them to another woman. 3, they could authorize the clinic to destroy them. Or 4, they could give them to the lab for research. So I'm really eager to hear your story. And so, Kate, your babies are from adopted embryos.
Mm-hmm. They are.
And can you tell me how that started and how that went?
Well, it goes back several years. I mean, we dealt with infertility for a long time. Wanted a baby, and it just didn't work out. We lost one to miscarriage. But it just didn't seem like that was just God's plan for our lives. And so we just kind of tried to accept that as much as we could, and just continue in serving God and working in the church. And I guess one of those things that I kind of came across was digging deep, and enjoyed that. The ladies' Bible study. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing because we've got a Facebook group with almost 9,000 women. So it's an international group, and it was just a wonderful blessing. It helped me grow, really helped me get through some of those difficult times. And yet there's also a big emphasis about motherhood and raising children through that. And at one point I had decided that it just hurt a little too much to hear another emphasis on raising our children in the Lord, and just thinking that wasn't going to happen. I told Drew that I thought I think I might not do it the next year. And he said, okay, that's fine, but just remember all the ladies you encouraged not to quit. And that stepped on my toes, and I decided maybe I'd do it another year. Well, that year was the year that we found out that there would be a Digging Deep Israel trip. And we've always wanted to go. And so because I was doing Digging Deep, I was qualified to sign up for that trip and bring my husband along. And we did. And so we traveled all over Israel with you and your lovely wife and maybe 47 other wonderful Christians. It was during that time on the Sea of Galilee, while we were there, that Cindy mentioned to me she had been working to try to find a Christian couple willing to adopt 5 embryos that she knew of that had been frozen for almost 6 years. And I about lost it right there. In fact, I think I did, and said, I want a baby so bad. And so not long after that conversation, I came and I tugged on Drew, and we're trying to go see the Sea of Galilee, and I'm telling him, there's 5 embryos that need adopting. We should do it. And he's going, what in the world are you talking about? I'm
Now,
here to see the Sea
interrupt you.
Galley.
So had you known about in vitro and about adopting embryos before this?
I was familiar with in vitro. We had worked with a fertility clinic through some of our infertility. We chose not to do in vitro. But I was very, very familiar with it and had actually heard of embryo adoption before. Funny thing, I had mentioned it to Drew, and he said, well, that's kind of weird. I don't think we'll do that. And I just left it at that. But it just took a few more years, and then actually knowing that there were embryos needing to be adopted.
That made it personal, didn't it? That
it
there
made it
were
very
actually
personal.
These 5 that we're looking for a home.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And so you went through an organization then that helps these adoptions. And is that the right word, adoption?
It is. So Nightlight Christian Adoptions does all types of adoptions, and embryo adoption is part of what they do. And the Snowflakes program is what is called the frozen embryo adoption. And we liked being able to use them because there were different states involved, from where they were located, from where we lived, to even the clinic that we wanted to use was in a completely different state. And so it just made a lot more sense to go with an adoption agency that could handle that. And that turned out to be a huge blessing because of the education that we were required to go through in order to just even qualify to be adoptive parents. Helped us really understand what our children may end up having to deal with as they grow up, learning that they're adopted and learning just all the different facets that come along with that. And it was just a big blessing to be able to learn about that and to be better prepared to raise them and to know that it's important that they know that they're adopted, know that they're chosen, and that not ever be a secret.
Do you think
because it could be so easy in this type of adoption to not tell anybody. Everybody assumes when you're pregnant
because
that's your biological child.
Yes.
And so that was something that was very much emphasized, and we were very thankful to learn that.
You think there's a difference in I don't know how to ask this, a child growing up knowing that he was born this way, that parents chose to not keep the embryos, as opposed to a baby is birthed and for whatever reason we choose not to keep the baby, to put the baby up for adoption. Is there a difference in that,
I
in a
think
child?
Adoption agencies are doing a lot of research on that right now.
I think so.
And they had asked us to, be some end in that to try to figure that out, because it's been going for about 20 to 30 years they've been doing this. And so there's enough kids now out there. They are asking those kind of, I guess, hard questions like that and trying to research that and figure out.
I know there's a hesitancy. I've read this more than once to offering an embryo twice or doing this once and then the to different parents after that, because there could be an emotional impact on that child growing up, that it wasn't just one family, it was 2 families or whatever, that, I don't know, that's complicated, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So Drew, tell me about you, and what were your concerns when you were posed with this possibility? Because it took some time, didn't it?
It took about 3 weeks because it was so unique to me. I saw it as science fiction, basically. We're taking this embryo and we are putting it into my wife, and that took a lot of time to process for me to try to figure that out, to go through that thought process. And is this okay? Is this something I want for my family? And looking back on it now, 2 years into this, it was one of the best decisions we ever made. But at the time, I had not heard of it. Now we've seen several news stories over the past couple of years about it. And, but for us, for me, it was just totally new and hard for me to grasp. And now, after going through it, we explain it to people as it's an adoption just 9 months earlier.
Yes.
And so it helps people wrap their mind around that.
The pregnancy is completely typical. Is that true?
As typical as pregnancy can be, yes.
Yeah.
I asked that just like a man, didn't I? So sorry. Yes, of course.
That's fine.
So, I mean, once the embryo is implanted, then that's that, right? I mean,
there are hormones that I had to take throughout most of the first trimester that would be in any type of in vitro program.
Okay.
Any embryo transfer, that's just kind of protocol.
I see.
Because the body you're forcing your body into it. The body doesn't create all those.
Forgive me if that was too personal. But I'm learning as I go about this. Good. Now, is there anything that you would do differently in retrospect? I mean, because for most of us who are watching this right now, this is so very new, and I'm just learning. But so what would you do differently in retrospect? Now the children are 2, right?
They're just over a year old.
They're a little over a year. Okay, so you said 2 years, and that's because from the beginning. So what would you do differently?
I think I would have done it sooner and talked to him a little bit more instead of just accepting his answer of that's weird.
Well, and it is interesting because, we had to go through the process of all the legal paperwork and all that. So we were processing this for a year and going through the educational stages of it, I guess. And so to us, we had much more time than like when we call family and say, this is what we're doing. And they would, I don't understand, and actually I even had one person tell me, I understand embryos and I understand adoption, but what does that mean together?
Of course.
Because it is so unique. And now we have, our church family and stuff, it's normal to them, because
they've had a chance to think through the whole process.
Think through it, and they've seen the kids grow, over the last year. I mean, they watched the pregnancy for 9 months, or for several months, and then they have held the kids, have played with the kids, and they know that they're just normal kids. They
seem very normal to me.
It's a unique story, but they're normal kids. It's the story is what's different, not the kids.
So now I just for full disclosure, I asked if it was okay to ask this question before I ask it, because this gets pretty personal. You adopted 5 embryo,
correct?
5 children, and so you've had 2 of them,
right?
Of course, now there's 3. And your intention is to have all 5. Well, Drew, tell me about this. Now, this is a different subject, but what are the choices in your position about the original parents, and what relationship is typical, and how does that work?
That we had to do a contract at the very beginning with the adoption agency that we went through, and having the adoption agency and their educational program really helped us to be able to think ahead on these things that we wouldn't think of on our own.
Right.
And a lot of the education talked about these kids, they have a history before us, I guess you would say. And so these kids will probably there's a good chance they will want to go back and find out what their genetic history, I guess, is. And so for us, when you go through infertility and you're going through that process, you're hurting, and it's more of an emotional decision, and you don't put the thought into everything that you would normally. And so they going through that contract process basically helped us open our eyes to these kids have a long story, and we fit into that story, but that story began before us. And so one of those decisions was what type of, I guess you'd say, relationship will we have with their, they're called helpers in this sense, but biological parents, I guess you would say. And so we sorted through that, and we ended up, you state that in the contract. And why that is good is because you will have questions on both sides of that. The helpers that created the embryo, they want to know what is going on with this. And so what we did was basically the minimum of what they said is once a year, you will send a report into us, or if you have direct contact with that family, you'll send it to them. And that is, I think, very beneficial on both sides, because we were able to, we have not met this family. We just have emailed a few times with them, but we are able to see pictures of their kids. One of them is I guess you'd say the same age as them for all practical purposes, but we were able to see what they look like, and this was kind of almost like what will our children look like in a few years. And just having that door open will be, if they ever want to go back, then it makes it, hopefully will make it much easier for them so that they can research. And a lot of the education for us was, as the adopting parents, you're going to be hurt when your kids say, I want to know my story before you. And that really helped us prepare for that of, okay, that's not saying I'm not Kate, or I'm not doing everything I need to be doing as a parent for them. They just have questions on their own. So.
Very good. Now, what you touched on something that I have just enjoyed in our conversations about the age of these adopted embryo. And could you just kind of spell that out for people watching?
That is one of the hardest questions when people ask, because we probably all have a little bit of a prankster in us, or a little bit of somebody who wants. And so our children were frozen for 6 years prior to us receiving them. And so little Lydia here is 8 years old. And we're hoping she'll learn to walk pretty soon.
She's 8 right now.
She's 8 years old.
She's well preserved.
She looks young for her age. But they are from birth just over a year old. They are 12 and a half months old. So it is very unique in we have basically the paperwork that says when they were created. And I'm sure these children will get that someday, and I'm sure they will be scratching their heads till they're old enough to understand that, because that is, and there are still 3 embryos out there the same age as them that have not been placed in the womb yet. And so, they're going to be the same age, but look younger. I don't know. It's very interesting to think about.
I just think that's fascinating. And after you and I had this conversation one time before, and after it was over, I just wanted to go sit somewhere and just think about it. just think about it. Now, let's talk about this. I think our viewers probably are naturally thinking about the spiritual implications of this. I do not see any reason why, on its face, that what we've talked about today violates any principle of Scripture. A couple is longing to conceive, unable to, and so you take an egg and a sperm and unite them outside the womb and implant that. Or adopting, if adoption in general is all right, of already born babies, then surely this must be applicable, must be the same ethically. But now there are some real spiritual wrongs that can be committed that are about this too, and we need to. I think we really need to talk about these. And so, what kinds of things would you say are in that category that you've thought of?
Well, thinking through this process, we had a lot of our questions we had to go through, and And a lot of it was so new. We just needed to think through that. And from our perspective, I guess we decided that we could offer these children a good Christian home. And that's what we needed to do. And of course we think of first chapter of James, there where it talks about pure religion. And so that's, for us, that's how we look at this. Now there are so many questions you have to go through and try to sort through and figure out. And we had a little bit older than us couple at church that really helped us in the medical field, really helped us think through this process, and go through it. And that was very beneficial to have, I guess, some people that helped us from a moral standpoint work through this. So
the first moral issue that comes to my mind would be the intentional creation of embryos, of little children, with the understanding that we're going to destroy some of those. And I do not see how that we could plan that any more than we could plan the abortion of a growing child inside of a womb. How could that be right? It can't be. Or even, in my mind, the ethics of it spiritually, to create embryos with the intention of never using them or even adopting them out is a challenge, because can I just abdicate my role as a father and do it so cavalierly? I don't mean to insult anybody that's cavalier, just that, I don't know. So these are ethical problems that can come about. And we need to be talking about this, don't we?
Yes, yeah. For people dealing with infertility, and having twins running around our house now and stuff, I would say really, really look into embryo adoption, because it is a great way to have that dream of having children and giving a Christian home to some children. As we talked about earlier, I mean, there's anywhere from I don't remember, 500,000 low end and up to 1.5 million frozen embryos out there in these fertility clinics that need a place to go. They need, hopefully, Christian homes. And this is a way that when we kind of tried to look at it from every angle, morally, it was a good route for us to go and not have questions on down the road, thinking back, did we do the right thing or not? We adopted children, just 9 months before normal. Five. Yes, 5. And 5 was, I was the one dragging my feet on that when people would say 5. And the funny story I tell on that is then going through the educational process, we learned that half of them make it to birth, basically. And so I decided that was great. We were going to have 2.5 kids. I could handle that. And then we transferred the first 2, and they both survived, and we were so excited. And we hope all 5 survive. I mean, we pray for that. We pray for those other 3 embryos. But yeah, 5 is looking more and more likely all time. So we went from a extremely quiet house for 14 years to a house covered in toys and loudness and a lot of joy in that home now. So,
well, Kate, do you have anything else that you want to say? I think that all of us who are here listening to your story are not just fascinated by it, but delighted by it. This is so exciting for your lives. And anything you want to add before we finish up?
I think the only thing I'd really want to add is just that motherhood is a blessing. And to the women out there who may be really hurting from infertility, from miscarriages, this is a wonderful option if you feel like this is something you could do physically. I know that there are sometimes pregnancy is just not an option for some women.
Yes.
But if this is something that someone is on the fence about, I would highly recommend it. I feel like we're getting to live out our Christianity in adopting children. I feel like we're getting to have that desire of motherhood that God puts in most women. That this is something that God, I feel like, has planned for us. He knew that these 5 needed parents, and he knew that we wanted children. And I just feel like he has providentially worked through all of it for us. And I would highly, highly encourage anybody who would like to look into it to please do. We'd be happy to talk to them. And I know we're going to give them some information on how to contact even Nightlight Christian Adoptions.
We will. And so what you'll find on your screen in a moment is contact information for Nightlight Christian Adoption. And they handle other kinds of adoptions too, but including embryonic adoption. Drew, you have a chorus there, but anything you want to say before we wrap up?
And I would say we did what was known as a known adoption, embryo adoption. We have not personally met that family, but that family said, we want a Christian family for these children to go to. And so if you are looking at that, if you've already made that decision to do in vitro, think very seriously and think hard about giving those children a Christian home. And it might take looking around some, but you can bless another family, or another couple that would love to have children and are hurting, wanting children and want to give that Christian home to a child. And so if you've made that decision, I would say, please research and find a Christian home, for those children to go to, because they will bring some joy to a family that would love to have them, and do that for them. And if you are dealing with infertility, it is very hard on marriages, on all kinds of relationships. This is a very unique way, but a way that you can be parents and raise up children in the Lord. And it has been a not easy, as life is very crazy and chaotic, but you feel so blessed and you have so much joy that you don't mind the crying children sitting in your lap and all of the things that come along with children. So
just like a more typical arrangement. Well, thank you for telling us and sharing your story with us. And I know this is very personal, but it's so very educational for people like me, and I'm very grateful. And I really want, before we go, for you to promise us that when there are 5, that we'll come back here and that we'll have another conversation. Is that a promise?
Yes, that we will see what works out in our journey with the other 3 embryos by then.
Of course.
We might need a few more chairs up here, and
we're rooting for 5.
we are too, but that would be great. It has been a wonderful journey. It has been very trying at times, but it has been so good. So we would love to come back in 5 years, and maybe we can get these 2 to set still through that one. So,
well, thank you all for coming and spending this time with us, and thank you for watching. This is GBN.